Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tang Men based on novel. So let's start. They entered the Golden Hall again. 96 and 98 were in the spotlight, while Hui Yuhao naturally caught some attention too, since he was in a wheelchair. He had caused some trouble on his first day of the tournament, but his performance had been average in the succeeding rounds. There wasn't anything very special about him. He wasn't like 96 and 98, who had blazed their way into this round. However, Hui Yuhao was able to edge out his opponents every time, and finally reached the round of 6. If he won this round, he would be qualified to represent the Duskwater Alliance. As there were only 6 people left, the stage in the hall was also much more spacious. There were 3 distinct regions, and the carving table in each region had been enlarged. At the center of the stage were 3 circular tables. Every table was stacked with rare metals. They were the rewards for the victors today. The startling thing was that the jewel region behind it had been dismantled. There was only the circular stage in the center. Hui Yuhao and the rest were brought to a tunnel behind the stage. They didn't enter through the main door of the hall like before. In addition to the 4 of them, there were 2 other young men around 27 or 28 years old waiting there, who appeared quite excited. They were also competitors in the round of 6. According to the information Chen An had given Hui Yuhao, they were both Class 5 Soul Engineers. They were the weakest 2 of the 6 remaining competitors. On the stage, a handsome young man wearing a dazzling golden shirt walked up to the stage. Greetings to all distinguished guests. I'm the MC for today's tournament. You can call me a Jin. I'll help everyone interpret today's fights. All the spectators got excited when they heard that the match was about to begin. They started to cheer, and whistling could be heard from time to time. They had placed heavy bets on today's fights, since they could now bet on specific individuals. As for how the 6 of them would be paired up, it was going to be decided using lot. This lot drawing would be very important. First, let me introduce all of you to our top 6 Soul Engineers. I must reiterate that the information that we released regarding the 6 of them before the start of the match, and the analysis that I'm going to give you now are all based on their performances in the previous rounds. We've never asked them what their class or abilities are. That's because it's taboo to talk about such things. A Jin's voice suddenly sounded very high-pitched. Let's welcome our first competitor, whose number is 37, onto the stage. A young man slightly to the front in the tunnel behind quickly ascended the stage. He took 2 to 3 steps and walked over in front of a Jin, placing both his hands behind his back. He has defeated many strong opponents en route to the last 6. He even created a strong yet rare Class 5 Soul tool in the previous round. We estimate that is a Class 5 Soul Engineer, and specializes in creating dexterous, offensive-type Soul tools. Next, let's welcome our number 85 competitor up onto the stage. The other young man also quickly went up to the stage. He stood beside 37. His introduction was similar to 37, it wasn't very special. Those who were sharp could tell that they were the weakest 2. They were also given higher odds to win. Third, let's welcome our number 66 Soul Engineer up on the stage. I'll need some of my staff members to give him a hand. Hui Yuhao was pushed onto the stage by 2 staff members. The MC came to his side and smiled at him before saying, although it's a little inconvenient for him to move, he managed to triumph in every round of this tournament. We don't know what his limit is, but we estimate him to be a Class 5 Soul Engineer. From his calm and composed performances, we can roughly tell that he has a strong, yet mysterious amount of potential. Our 4th competitor today is our number 88 Soul Engineer. He has been wearing a mask all this while, and has a huge and burly figure. He too walked up to the stage, and quickly made his way over beside Hui Yuhao. He once demonstrated his strength. We estimate him to be between a Class 5 and Class 6 Soul Engineer. In fact, I'd like to know why he's always wearing a mask. Perhaps he's a familiar, reputable Soul Engineer in our empire. I rate him highly. He too listened to Hui Yuhao's instructions and didn't mutter a word. After all, he was wearing a mask. His appearance seemed very cold. Our 5th competitor is our number 98 Soul Engineer. He is very strong, and even possesses an extremely special, sharp carving blade. We believe it to be a top-ranked carving blade, and estimate him to be a Class 6 Soul Engineer. We can confirm that his abilities are Class 6 and above. I don't think any of the first 4 competitors would like to draw him in this round. Our last competitor is our number 96 Soul Engineer. Just like our number 98 competitor, we believe him to be a Class 6 Soul Engineer. He also possesses a sharp carving blade that we believe to be a top-notch carving blade. We've announced earlier that he and our number 96 Soul Engineer won't meet each other in this round since they are the strongest. This is to ensure that we can send our best lineup to the grand final. Let the lot drawing begin. Let's draw the lots. When the MC uttered these 4 words, 98 deliberately glanced at Hu Yuhao in his wheelchair, who was a head shorter than everyone else. His lips moved, and he seemed to be mouthing, "Pray." Hu Yuhao smiled a strange smile. "Yes. Pray, but it's you who has to pray that you won't be matched with me." The lot drawing process was simple. There was a large crystal ball, and 6 tiny balls inside with magnets on them. There were 2 magnets in each of 3 different areas inside the crystal ball, and the tiny balls that were drawn to the magnets in these respective areas, when the crystal ball began to rotate, would face each other today. The balls with 96 and 98 were already attached to 2 different regions, which meant the 2 wouldn't meet each other in this round. The 4 other balls were still at the bottom. Alright, I will commence today's crystal lottery. Spin. The MC pressed a button beneath the crystal, and the crystal ball gradually started to rotate. The 4 balls at the bottom were gradually tossed into the air as the crystal began to spin faster and faster. The 3 grooved areas with magnets attached to them didn't move. The first ball was quickly sucked away to one of the remaining empty regions. Alright, number 88 into the 3rd region. I have to say that you're quite fortunate, Mysterious Soul Engineer 88. You're lucky that you're not up against the 2 of them, who we have estimated as powerful Class 6 Soul Engineers. Hikaitu's number was the first to be drawn. 98 glanced at Hu Yuhao once more, as if he was saying, "Your chances of meeting us are a lot higher now." Another tiny ball was sucked into one of the regions with a whistle right at this moment. This time, this ball was sucked into the region with 96 inside. 37 versus 96, inside the first region. 37 was instantly overcome with despair. He knew that he had a chance against Hikaitu, but he had no chance against 96. 96 was confirmed to be a Class 6 Soul Engineer, and he possessed a ranked carving knife as well. Alright, the 5th one has been retrieved. 66 versus 98, in the 2nd region. Both 98 and Hu Yuhao's eyes immediately became a little peculiar. Their gazes met, and Hu Yuhao saw a sardonic smile, while 98 saw a look of exasperation and helplessness. There was no suspense with the last draw. 85 versus 88, in the 3rd region. Hikaitu was practically given a walkover. Alright, the lottery has been completed. Everyone will be given 15 minutes to place their bets. Only you who are here will be able to take advantage of this treatment. The opportunity will never return if you let it slip. The 15 minutes begins now. May I invite the 3 contesting pairs to move to your respective seats. The next 10 hours will be tiring and exhausting, but the ultimate winner can take the rare metals that have been prepared for you at the center of the competition stage. It's very difficult to evaluate these metals, because they can't be purchased on the market. Every winner will win 54 different kinds of rare metals, 5 kilos of each. The lottery had been completed, and the entire Golden Hall began to hustle and bustle. Everybody had their own guesses and estimations from the lottery, and everyone would undoubtedly have the most confidence making their bets at a time like this. Of course, placing their bets within the allotted 15 minutes also meant that their odds were a lot lower than before. Even so, the entire place still descended into chaos, and all 36 betting booths were packed with people. Hikaitu came over to Hu Yuhao and pushed his wheelchair into the 2nd region, while 98 tagged along. "You're finished, little fellow. Your only chance to live is if you admit defeat right now," he continued proudly. "This is what it means to say God knows what you did. You're too arrogant, so you ended up having to face me." Ha 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 ha. Hu Yuhao turned around and looked at Hikaitu. He frowned and said, "Am I that arrogant? 98, are you that confident of gobbling me up?" 98 grunted coldly and replied, "If I can't beat someone like you, HMPH. Hu Yuhao laughed. "Why don't we place a bet? This tournament exists for wagering anyway." A suspicious look flashed across the other Soul Engineer's face. "You still dare to wager with me, young man? What are the stakes?" Hu Hao said, I'll take your carving knife. If you lose, then that carving knife will belong to me, and I won't take your life. See, I'm such a conversationalist, and I'm so amiable and generous. You want my carving knife? 98 wasn't a fool. He could tell from Hu Hao's smiling face that he wasn't anxious or worried at all, and he felt alarm bells go off in his head. Has he been hiding his abilities this entire time? What about you? Unless you have your own ranked carving knife, you're not worthy of making this bet with me. Hu Hao answered, I don't have a ranked carving knife, but I have a soul tool. What do you think? He reached inside his pocket and took out a soul tool that resembled a chest plate. It was the Hongchen's blessing that Jing Hongchen had given him. Take it and let him feel it, brother. Hu Hao passed his Hongchen's blessing to He Kai-tu beside him. He Kai-tu's took Hu Hao's Hongchen's blessing and stepped over to 98. They were all soul engineers, so everyone was relatively discerning about soul tools. He Kai-tu revealed the Hongchen's blessings formation arrays to 98 for a single look before he infused his soul power into it and released a thread of the soul tool's aura. He then passed it back to Hu Hao. 98's eyes grew slack. That was a miniature formation array. Soul tools weren't necessarily more powerful as they got bigger, and this was especially true with regards to their formation arrays. Smaller soul tools were easier to carry, too. For instance, Hongchen's blessing was only several centimeters thick. How could Hu Hao carry it with him everywhere he went if the formation arrays inside were too big? Creating miniature formation arrays was 10 times harder than the same normal-sized formation arrays. Typically, only soul engineers above Class 7 would attempt something like this. 98 had only been given one look at it, but he realized that the soul tool that he had just seen possessed at least 5 miniature formation arrays, and every single one seemed exceedingly complex. This soul tool was definitely not a prototype, and was undoubtedly Class 8, at the very least. It also possessed a dense and intense aura. The miniature formation arrays inside were already incredibly valuable by themselves, because every high-level soul engineer crafted formation arrays with their own unique methods. Learning something about these unique methods was priceless to mid-level soul engineers. 98 hadn't expected Hu Hao to wager something as precious as this against him. Of course, he was confident that his ranked carving knife's value wasn't inferior to this soul tool. Greed began to stir in his heart. His eyes closed into slits as he stared at Hu Hao, and Hu Hao stared back at him. Hu Hao's eyes were calm, and there even a tinge of condescension in them. Is this a trick? Has he been hiding his abilities this whole time? He wants to bait me and win my ranked carving knife. 98 was a little arrogant, but he wasn't an idiot. Otherwise, he wouldn't have become the soul engineer that he was today before the age of 30. He pondered long and hard, and decided that he would reject this wager. Even though his aura would be beaten back, because of this, it was better than actually losing his ranked carving knife that was too precious to him. However, he noticed a fine detail right at this moment. Hu Hao was using his right hand to grip the wheelchair's armrest, and it seemed a little strong. Even his fingers' joints were a little greenish-white. Soul engineers all had good eyes. Otherwise, how could they craft intricate and delicate soul tools? A thought flashed through his mind as he stared at Hu Hao's right hand, which was still gripping the wheelchair's armrest tightly. Maybe he doesn't have the confidence to defeat me at all, and he simply wants to use this wager to beat back my grandeur. 98 began to scrutinize Hu Hao closely when he thought about that possibility. He quickly found another fine detail. Hu Hao's other arm seemed to be quivering, the arm that he had never used before. Hu Hao's calm eyes were flickering with something, and those eyes seemed to betray a little anxiety and discordance. These details weren't obvious, but 98 managed to pick up on these clues as he observed Hu Hao closely. Okay, I'll take the bet. A confident smile surfaced on his face. Hu Hao was momentarily stunned. You're really betting with me? I'm lacking a ranked carving knife anyway. Many thanks to you, then. 98 stared back mischievously and said, Do you really have the confidence to defeat me? I don't think so. Since you want to die, little fellow, I will fulfill your wishes today. Hu Hao answered coldly, We'll have that bet, then. If you're not afraid, we can make this bet public, and the Duskwater Alliance can be our witness. Otherwise, what if you lose and you deny that this bet exists? 98 was full of avarice, and his mind was already made up. No matter how he looked at Hu Hao, he felt as if he was trying to put up a strong front. A cold smile appeared on his face as he said, "All right, the Duskwater Alliance will witness our wager. They will see how you lose that soul tool to me. You, come here." He reached out and hollered at the MC on stage not far from where they were. Akin walked over hurriedly. He was just an MC, and he didn't dare to offend the Sun Moon Empire's soul engineers. Soul engineers were the most highly regarded profession in the country. "What do you need, sir?" Akin sounded a little fawning. 98 grunted coldly and said, "I want to wager with my opponent, and we are betting on who will be the eventual winner. I want the Duskwater Alliance to lay witness to this wager." "Okay." Akin's eyes sparkled. He was the Golden Hall's top-rated MC, and he knew all too well what the audience loved to watch. Exciting things were a lot better for the gambling atmosphere, and this was especially true when everyone was still placing their bets. 98 grabbed the speaker-type soul tool from his hands and said loudly, "My stake is a carving knife. It's the same one that will be used later on in the competition." He stuffed the speaker-type soul tool back into Ajin's hands after this sentence. When he turned around at Huiyuhao, he could see that Huiyuhao's head was lowered, and there seemed to be sweat dripping down from his temples. "Why don't we let it go, brother?" Hikaitu whispered into Huiyuhao's ear. "Let it go." "No, it's too late. The announcement has already been made." His ears were pretty good, and 98 could clearly tell what they were going on about. At this moment, the three judges that the Duskwater Alliance had sent forth stepped onto the competition stage. The judges had changed once more because this was the round of 6, so the judges that came forward today were all Class 7 soul engineers. These three mighty Class 7 soul engineers had veils draped over their faces, as it was clear that they had some reputation in the outside world, so they were afraid that people familiar with them would recognize them. The three judges stepped onto the competition stage and quickly arrived before them. 98 directly retrieved his carving knife and handed it over. He wasn't afraid of people pining after his carving knife, as the world seemed to look on. Furthermore, he had quite a background to back himself up. His dark green carving knife was a tad bigger than most carving knives. The blade seemed to have rust marks, but they didn't seem like actual rust. It seemed ancient and unornamented, and there were two dragon-shaped engravings on both sides of the blade. It emanated chilly sensations, and even the naked eye could tell that this carving knife was extraordinary. The middle judge among the three took the carving knife carefully. He was immediately overcome with a look of astonishment. "This? Darkness Green Dragon?" 98 answered proudly, "Yes, it's my Darkness Green Dragon." The judge turned around and took Ajin's speaker-type soul tool. He deepened his voice and said, 98 has chosen his Darkness Green Dragon as his stake. This is a ranked carving knife. The Darkness Green Dragon is ranked 59th on the carving knife leaderboard. It carries darkness and wind elements, and any soul tool that it creates will carry these two elements. It's 3 times heavier than typical carving knives, and is well known for its stability. Using this carving knife with suitable soul tools will create formidable effects, and it will have a 10% increase in success rate when forging soul tools above Class 7. Yes, this was a formidable ranked carving knife. Ranked carving knives were almost priceless to soul engineers. The three judges turned towards Huiyuhao when they finished introducing 98's carving knife. Huiyuhao was grasping his Hongchen's blessing as tightly as he could with his right hand, and his eyebrows were tightly knit together, but he didn't make a sound at all. 96 came over beside 98 and asked him a few questions inquisitively while he glanced at Huiyuhao from time to time. 98 whispered some explanations to him with a smile on his face. 96 frowned slightly, and he responded as if he were chiding his friend. "What are you betting with?" The judge stepped up to Huiyuhao. Huiyuhao hesitated for a moment before he over his Hongchen's blessing. "My teacher gave this to me. Don't spoil it." The look of reluctance on his face was undeniable as he spoke. The leading judge examined the soul tool's formation arrays as he took Huiyuhao's Hongchen's blessing. His body trembled as he blurted out, "This is the illustrious Virtue Halls." "Shut up." Huiyuhao interrupted him with an angry shout. The chief judge nodded. He picked up the speaker-type soul tool and said, 66 has chosen a high-level soul tool as his stake. For some special reasons, we cannot describe this item, but we can attest that its value is comparable to the Darkness Green Dragon. All right, we have finished assessing their stakes, and the Darkness Green Dragon will temporarily be given back to 98 for use in the tournament. This soul tool will be kept with us, and it will be given to the victor after this round. The wager has been established, and the Duskwater Alliance will treat either party that goes back on his word as enemies. We will do our best to make sure that this wager goes through. The three judges kept the Hongchen's blessing after the announcement and returned to their seats. The judges were sitting on 3 elevated chairs 3 meters above the ground, so they could watch everything that was going on with the contestants from their vantage point. Ajin took the speaker-type Soul Tool back and said loudly, "All right, the interlude is over. I trust that the wager between these two soul engineers has influenced your bets in some way, my dear guests. You have 10 minutes left, hurry up and make your bets. The booths will close once time is up." The gamblers were indeed a lot livelier after this interlude's excitement and stimulation. Hui Yuhao's face seemed to glow with ice-cold light, as he hit himself softly on the left shoulder. An amused smile broke out across his face. He's taken the bait in the end. He Kaitu escorted Hui Yuhao to the second region's crafting desk, before he patted him on the shoulder and returned to his own side. 98 walked over to his own crafting desk opposite Hui Yuhao. There was a bright smile on his face as he said, "So, this soul tool is from the illustrious Virtue Hall. It's quite impressive, looks like you're committed quite a bit to this gamble." Hui Yuhao answered coldly, "You still have a chance to regret your words. Otherwise, won't you be devastated if you lose your ranked carving knife to me?" 98 laughed out loud. "I wouldn't be so sure that I'll be the one that will be devastated after this round. You're daydreaming if you want me to retract my wager. Weren't you so arrogant and outrageous before this? Why are you cowering now? Enough bullshit, we'll see who wins this wager with our abilities. Don't worry, even though I have absolute confidence that I will win, I will not underestimate you. I will use the soul tools that I'm most adept and familiar with against you today, and I won't give you a single thread of a chance at all." Hui Yuhao's face changed slightly, but he said nothing more. He closed his eyes and began to conserve his energy and mentally prepare himself. The rare metals and the myriad of refined metals that were to be used in this round were sent up. This round was 10 hours long, so a lot more metals had been prepared for today. Some were placed on the crafting desks, while a rack specially given to each contestant was placed next to each of them for their own convenience. The 15 minutes allotted for betting quickly passed, and the gamblers returned to their seats one after another. After the lots had been drawn, the audience knew that the most attractive and interesting face-off would be between the two soul engineers, who had made their own individual bet. The other two were conspicuously unbalanced, and the odds were pathetically low. The odds for the match between Hui Yuhao and 98 were relatively higher, while Hui Yuhao's odds were the highest. This was because he was against 98, and nobody could see how he had any advantage at all. Without talking about anything else, the judges estimated him as a Class 5 soul engineer, while 98 was a Class 6 soul engineer. 98 also possessed a ranked carving knife, the Darkness Green Dragon. Hui Yuhao's odds were at 1:3, while his opponent's odds were at 5:4. The other two matchups were more evenly split. Begin. The soundproof barriers rose right after the chief judge's announcement. The MC was already outside the competition stage, and was responsible for narrating today's competition. He quickly got onto a tall structure outside the competition stage, and took a seat 5 meters above the stage. His seat was equipped with a speaker-type soul tool and a telescopic soul tool. The MC could clearly see what the 6 soul engineers were doing on stage. All 6 soul engineers began to move once the announcement was made. This round had no limit as to the number of soul tools that each contestant could create. That also meant that every contestant was allowed to create as many as they wanted within the stipulated time. The choice that each contestant had to make with regards to the volume and power would be up to them. Hui Yuhao's eyes were especially focused and serious today. He had the same faith that he would definitely be victorious, but he also understood that 98 wasn't easy to deal with. The man had a ranked carving knife, and he was also a Class 6 soul engineer, so his standards were comparable to Hui Yuhao's own abilities. The only thing that guy didn't have was Hui Yuhao's spirit eyes, which gave him an advantage. A dash of golden light glowed beneath Hui Yuhao's eyes. He waved his right hand over his forehead, and a green blade charged with life energy appeared in his hands, his life guardian blade. His opponent had a ranked carving knife, so how could Hui Yuhao match up to his opponent if he didn't use his own? The people that had bet on 98 became a little gloomy once they heard this. 98 couldn't hear what was going on outside, but he seemed to feel something when Hui Yuhao took out his life guardian blade. He looked up, and was momentarily stunned, and his eyes coincidentally met Hu Yuhao's stare. Their gazes met, and he was met with Hu Yuhao's calm and composed smile. He grunted coldly and muttered, "So that's the thing you've been hiding. Let's not talk about the fact that your carving knife is not even ranked, and even if it is ranked, it's more important to see who the user is." Hu Yuhao didn't respond at all. He picked up a piece of rare metal known as multi-ridged devil gold and began his own construction. This metal had a unique characteristic. This metal always seemed like it had uncountable ridges even when it was first mined, but everything else was as smooth like a mirror. This was how the name multi-ridged devil gold came about. Multi-ridged devil gold was different from other metals, because it was inherently resistant to soul power. Any soul power that was infused into it would be rejected, and it could even produce a reactionary force several times the power of the soul power infused inside. If the soul power infused inside exceeded the range that the multi-ridged devil gold could take, the metal would explode. Multi-ridged devil gold wasn't considered very rare, because it was still produced in relatively large amounts. It was typically the best choice for crafting defensive soul tools. This was especially true when soul engineers wanted to craft formation arrays for a protective soul barrier. The product would possess the multi-ridged devil gold's natural resistance to energy and soul power once completed, an excellent effect. The only problem was that multi-ridged devil gold was extremely tough, and at the same time naturally resistant to soul power. This meant it was a lot more difficult to create formation arrays from this metal. However, this was no problem at all before Hu Yuhao's Life Guardian blade. The sharp bluish-green blade cut nimbly into the multi-ridged devil gold, and the Life Guardian blade absorbed every single ounce of life energy from the metal with every stroke and every part it touched. With Hu Yuhao's precise control, life energy was only sucked away from the places that the blade actually cut into, and those parts naturally became extremely weak without any life energy at all. Hu Yuhao was engraving and cutting into the multi-ridged devil gold as if he was slicing tofu, and the metal was quickly forged and engraved into a disc-like shape about the size of his palm. Ajin knew quite a bit about crafting soul tools, so he could commentate properly. His jaw hung open as he looked on from his high seat. "Oh my heavens! That's just incredible. Multi-ridged devil gold is extremely resistant to soul power, but it's become as weak as tofu beneath 66's mystical carving knife." 98 was also carving and sculpting a rare metal. He was focused on creating his own soul tool, so he no longer looked at Hu Yuhao. All his energy and attention was focused on the soul tool in front of him. His darkness green dragon flickered with faint green light with every stroke, and caused the metal to ripple at the same time. The golden hall outside was in an uproar compared to the competition stage silence. Everybody was discussing things vigorously with their companions and the people they were familiar with. 10 hours was a really long time, and many people started to leave after watching the show for more than 2 hours. However, they were just getting something to eat, and weren't actually leaving. The Dusk Water Alliance's service was exceedingly good. Food and refreshments were provided outside the Golden Hall, everything free of charge. The audience could also redeem blankets free of charge, and the sofas that they were given to sit on were spacious and very comfortable for lying down. Even though these sofas couldn't compare to actual beds, it was much better than sitting up for the next couple of hours. The Golden Hall's lighting became progressively dimmer over time, so the competition stage's lighting stayed the strongest. Time continued to pass, and soul tools were completed one after another. Ajin stepped off his high seat after another period of commentating to rest as well. It was getting late, and the gamblers had to rest. They couldn't absorb any more commentating anyway. The 6 people on stage were very focused, and they didn't want to waste even a single second of time. The contestants would signal to the judges after each soul tool was completed, so that the judges could assess them and confirm that they had been completed. These soul engineers could keep their soul tools only after the judges had given their approval, and these soul tools would be used in the face-off afterwards. After 3 hours, 98 had already finished 2 soul tools, while Hu Yuhao had yet to finish a single one. He was the only person among the 6 contestants who hadn't raised his hand yet. Some of the gamblers who weren't resting and were still very excited, and those who had placed their bets on him, were getting worried. Of course, this was a minority, as only those who could take a high risk would choose to bet on the underdog. 98 completed 4 soul tools in 6 hours. This was an astonishing speed, as all 4 soul tools were Class 5 soul tools. Class 6 soul engineers didn't have to craft Class 6 soul tools if they were limited by time. Soul engineers would have to consider defending themselves first before anything else in a contest between soul engineers, rather than attacking their adversary. Therefore, one soul tool was clearly not enough for combat, and having a balanced and suitable combination of soul tools was the best choice. 6 hours went by, but Hu Yuhao still hadn't raised his hand a single time. There were many seemingly sophisticated components on his crafting desk. Some were formation arrays, while others were parts and accessories that the judges couldn't fathom. Nobody knew what exactly he was doing, and they were perplexed that he still hadn't finished a single soul tool. 98 would look up at Hu Yuhao from time to time. His eyes seemed a little doubtful as well. What's this fellow trying to do? Why doesn't he have a single completed soul tool yet? He must have some ability to boast of if he dares to use that thing as his stake. Is he panicking? No, he must be using some special method or technique. His eyes are very focused, and it doesn't look like he's giving up. 98 naturally paid more attention to Hu Yuhao as these thoughts ran through his head. His eyes darted to the crafting desk opposite him intermittently, and his hand movements were naturally a little slower than before. He quickly discovered that Hu Yuhao was actually crafting one single soul tool. Those parts and accessories were laid around the table to form a vague shape. He's only crafting one soul tool. Is he trying to gamble everything he has on some excessively powerful attack? Hu Yuhao glanced at the hourglass next to him. I have 1 hour left. I guess I have enough time to finish it. Hu Yuhao wasn't in a hurry. He sat there with his eyes closed so that he could focus his attention, and he channeled soul power across his body to adjust his body's state and his state of mind. His soul power couldn't complete its circulation, because his left arm and his legs were frozen. Therefore, he found it a lot more difficult to adjust his condition and his body's state. This was also a substantial reason why he felt so exhausted after just 10 hours. If he had done this before he was injured, he could continue for 2 days and 2 nights without a problem. I have to accelerate my absorption of the ultimate ice origin energy of heaven and earth. Fortunately, I've found some methods recently. 15 minutes went by, but Hu Yuhao was still sitting there motionless, and the round was inching towards its end. There were very few people who had placed their bets on him, but these few people were still exceedingly displeased as they watched him, and many of them even started to curse and shout. There would be a corresponding dole on the soul engineers' respective desks for each soul tool that they completed. At this point, the soul engineer with the most soul tools had 6 finished products, but Hu Yuhao hadn't even completed one. He wouldn't even be allowed to enter the face-off after this if he didn't have a single completed soul tool. Everybody looked on as the 10 hours slowly ticked down to 15 minutes, time continued ticking down. The other 5 contestants had already finished their work. Nobody would dare to risk the final minutes to complete their soul tools. They gave themselves enough of a buffer and reserve time during their crafting process, so all their eyes drifted over to Hu Yuhao at the same time. They could see that Hu Yuhao didn't have a single doll on his crafting desk at all, meaning he had no finished product. The other 5 contestants had different expressions on their faces, and even Hikaitu's eyes flickered with a hint of worry. Hunchen's blessing is a class 9 soul tool. What's he doing? With his spiritual detection to guide him, how can he not create a single soul tool after 10 hours? The hourglass had dwindled down to its final minutes, and the fine grains of sand were gradually flowing away. 98 smiled condescendingly. He was entirely confident of winning even if Hu Yuhao could finish crafting the soul tool he was working on. It was easy to make mistakes when working under such tense conditions. Besides, could this soul tool be operational and effective? In other words, could he really succeed in completing it? Even if he does succeed, I already have a plan to counter that. What can he do with just one soul tool? Yes, his stake was quite impressive. It looked like a defensive soul tool that's at least class 8. Very suitable for me. It's done. Hu Yuhao raised his right hand vigorously, and his soul tool dropped down onto his crafting desk with a clang. His hourglass still had a teeny bit of sand. The gamblers who placed their bets on him fell back into their respective seats, as if their souls had departed their bodies. Hu Yuhao had finally completed one soul tool, which meant that there was still a thread of hope. A single thread was better than nothing at all. 98 frowned from where he sat opposite Hu Yuhao. He could see that Yuhao had forged a very strange-looking soul tool, that it was shaped like a shield. The shield's physical appearance was split into 3 different parts. There was a protruding center shaped like a sphere and as large as a human head, whose silver-white metal surface shone with gentle bluish-green light. The shield's outer surface was mostly gray metal, with this protruding hemisphere at its center, and otherwise very unassuming. Its outermost circumference was a pale blue metal, and a lot thinner compared to its other parts. One would realize upon closer inspection that this shield was crafted by assembling many different components together. There were multiple rare metals contained inside, and even an established Seoul engineer like 98 couldn't identify them all with one look. Time's up, contestants. Please stop everything you're doing. Judges, please step forward to assess their Seoul tools. A Jin was back on the stage. The soundproofing barrier dropped, and clamorous noises immediately flooded the competition stage. The three judges were already on stage, and the first person they approached was Hui Yuhao. Hui Yuhao hadn't produced a single Seoul tool throughout the entire roundup until the last moment, and they wanted to make sure whether he was qualified to continue in this round. A few people were sitting inside a guest lounge, at the center of a structure, hovering in the air above the Golden Hall. There was a lady dressed in a long black robe seated in the middle of everyone, her baggy and oversized robe covering her entire body. One could only tell her gender from the faint lines of her physical frame. She was wearing a conical bamboo hat, and a black veil covered her face. Only her two peculiar bluish-gray eyes were revealed, and they were silently watching everything that was happening outside. The guest lounge was very quiet at this moment. Everybody was just watching without making a sound. "What do you think about 66, old 3, the lady sitting in the middle asked plainly. The person she was talking to was an elderly man, who looked about 60 years old. His silver-white hair dangled behind his head, and he had a very tough and muscular physique. He wasn't that young anymore, but his eyes were still exceedingly sharp and pithy. Deflection and absorption at the same time. What's he trying to achieve?" The vice-sect leader's silver-white eyes showed a little doubt and suspicion. The elderly man shook his head and said, "I won't be able to guess that, either." Even though he's not considered a very high-level Seoul engineer, every Seoul engineer has his or her own innovations and creativity. This Seoul tool's complexity can be compared to a Class 7 Seoul tool, and I can tell from the final assembly phase that there are many gears and other structures that I cannot understand. Most of them should be his own inventions. I have to say that this youth is a genius. I wish to take him in under our wing if it's possible. Another elderly man sitting on the vice-sect leader's other side smiled and remarked, "Even you hold this fellow in high regard. Since that's the case, I'll find someone to talk to him after the contest and ask him about his thoughts. Some of my people told me before this that they've closely inspected the Seoul tool that he's using for their individual wager, and that Seoul tool is from the illustrious Virtue Hall. Furthermore, it's likely that the hallmaster of the Virtue Hall, Jing Hongchen himself, was the one who created it. It's a Class 8 Seoul tool at the very least, but its actual strength can only be confirmed after proper assessment." The vice-sect leader sounded a little surprised. Can he be Jing Hongchen's disciple? But I've never heard of Jing Hongchen having a crippled disciple. Do you think this fellow can defeat your precious disciple? The first elderly man shook his head and said, "It's hard to say. Between my two disciples, Huang Jing is relatively level-headed and steady, and he does things more stably. He's the senior brother, and lives up to his status. However, Mo Ku is more talented. But his greatest weakness is that he is easily arrogant and condescending. He's a little better in front of me, but is always arrogant and condescending towards outsiders. I've reminded him countless times, but he's never kicked the habit. I do wish to see him lose to 66 today, and that's not a bad thing for his future growth and development." The vice-sect leader said, "We shall wait and see, then." Second elder, how are the Duskwater Alliance's profits looking from this tournament? The other elderly man that spoke to the first one replied, "We have gained almost 33% more than our original projections." The vice-sect leader nodded her head and said, "Very well. After this, we will increase our control over the government's rare metals. You have to send some people when the time comes, as these are our sect's core resources." "Yes," the second elder acknowledged respectfully. Part 1 end here.